Hello and welcome to The Edge, our podcast on everything leadership and teams. I'm Jenny Miller. I'm one of the founding directors at Management Dynamics. Here with Ali.
Hello, I'm Alison Grieve, the other director from Management Dynamics. Delighted to join you today.
Thank you. So today we thought we'd talk about a concept which we call me to we to us. All will become a bit clearer once we start talking about this. Ali, do you want to tell us a little bit about what do we mean by me to we to us?
Well, these are what we think are transitions that teams go through on their way to high performance and mastery of enduring, sustaining high performance. And so that we meet many teams, and we'd say that many teams, most teams, in fact, that we work with, who can be good teams, let's face it, and maybe getting good performance and good results, are me teams. So this is where there's a lot of individual focus. They're often siloed and so on. And we'll talk more in detail about what that is. But what we want to do is move those teams to we teams. And we teams are when they have a shared sense of goal and purpose and cohesion and work together. And you have to have that we going on. It's all about inclusion and all of that to get to high performance. But that's not the end of the journey, because actually that's a very internal focused view. And we know that teams are part of a wider system. And so the wider system, which could be seen as the team of teams, is the us. And that's the holy grail. That's where we're trying to get organizations to, and leaders of organizations to recognize that actually it's a shift from me, an individualized view of the world, to building a high performing team, to then building an organization and a culture where all the teams are high performing. And that's where you get to us. Is that a good summary, Jenny?
Very good summary. I couldn't have put it better myself, Ali. Well done. So let's start with the me. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of, how do you know when a team is very me focused, and what are some of the symptoms that you'd see within that team? So, in terms of, you said most teams, I think maybe all teams that we start working with are pretty me focused, maybe to varying extents.
I live in hope.
But often we can never say never, right? We can never say always, but most, I'd say the vast majority of the teams that we work with, when we first start working with them, are very me focused. And I think it's very natural, actually, for that to be the case. If you think about how organizations are structured, people are brought in as probably as an expert in their field, to deliver on something. The whole interview process is about everything that they have accomplished to date and everything they will be doing in their new role. And by the way, and here's a bunch of people that all happen to also report to the same boss as you. Now off you go. And so naturally, of course, they're keen to succeed, keen to be to achieve what's been asked of them. Maybe they're a leader in the organization, so they have their own function or department that they are also leading. And so we're programmed in those situations to think about, okay, so what's the impact I'm going to have on this team of people that I lead, and how can I make a difference to this organization? And then all of the organizational structures we have around performance management, reward, and so on are geared up to rewarding and performance managing the individual, not the team. So it's really, really natural that I think teams have a bunch of individuals that make up the team, as opposed to a group that naturally, automatically collaborates with each other. Is that kind of what you would see as well, Ali, or do you have a different perspective?
Oh, definitely. I mean, and it's completely normal. Everybody has their own job objectives. Generally, they get bonuses paid on, individual performance. There's some places that might have a little bit of team or business shared kind of performance reward, but on the whole, we're really saying, it's on you, the individual, to deliver. You do see pockets of some people who really collaborate well. Sometimes they might come out as cliques in teams where
Mm.
there's a few people who've worked really well with others in the past and they kind of rely on each other. Gallup, from an engagement perspective, has that lovely question that people hate. Have you got a best friend at work? And what it's really getting to is there's someone who covers your back, who you can go and moan and whinge to. And we all need, for high levels of engagement, to know that we've got some best friends at work. But actually, why should we just have one best friend at work? I mean, we need to have a whole bunch within our team who are there to help us deliver all the things that we need to deliver. And surely we should be there for them too. And this is not about being best buddies outside. I mean, it's nice. I've made some great friends through work. But, high performance teams and getting from me to we doesn't mean to say that you're going to go out on a barbecue all the time with each other, but it is saying that you respect each other and that you enjoy working together, and there's something there that's shared in terms of the ownership of the performance of what everybody pulls together, that synergistic piece. And so there's something that's missing, I think, in teams when it's very individual.
And some of the things that you might hear around the organization are, oh, that team's very siloed. There's quite an individualistic focus within that team. The team members themselves might also say, I don't feel particularly part of this team. I don't feel particularly supported. I just get on and do my own thing.
Yeah.
Those
And we
kinds
see
of
it in
things are the kinds of things you'd
leadership.
hear.
Yeah, we see it in leadership teams a lot where, the leaders have responsibility for their own business function. So they know they're part of the leadership team. They might be on the board or they might be one level down, but they know that they're there, that they're leaders of the business, but they still look down and feel more responsible for their business function than for anybody else's function. There's generally not a sense of, actually, I might need to give up resources in sales because marketing could do with them, or logistics, because then as a business we'll function even better. So, they might do it in the end because of some cajoling and going on, but it's not the same sort of shared thing. And there's many of those leadership teams where those leaders haven't felt either accountable or even the desire to challenge and contribute to other business functions operation. They might have ideas and thoughts on it, but they don't share it. Sort of go, oh no, that's their patch. And by the way, I don't want anybody of them doing this to me either. So this is my area of expertise.
Yeah, keep out. Yeah,
keep out.
I think that's a lovely example of a symptom that you start to see when you've got that me mentality going on. It's very much a keep out of my patch. I'll keep out of yours. It's a reciprocal thing. And you might also start to get sharp elbows happening. So what I mean by sharp elbows is kind of like, oi, get out of my way kind of thing. For those of you listening, you can't see me move my arms up and down, but that's what I'm doing. So it's literally nudging people out of the way to get to the front. It's a fight for resources as opposed to how can we achieve our objectives together and share resources accordingly. So it's quite a competitive environment, or it can be, certainly depending upon the nature of the work that the team is doing. If it is a sales team, for example, you can get some huge amounts of competitiveness happening, and not wanting to share information with others in case they might use it to do better than you. And so you can get some pretty poor behaviors happening in a team like this, depending on the work that people are doing. But at its best, it can be just a case of a lack of collaboration and really boring meetings that happen because there's no sense of why are we a team. When we are a team and have team meetings, what do we even talk about? And it's probably, if we think about the routines that teams like that have this me focus, it's probably, how can I use up as much airtime to share with the rest of the team all the wonderful things I'm doing in my area? And that's probably about impressing the boss more than anything, or raising your profile in some way.
Yeah. I mean, often those meetings are a way for the boss to get a quick catch up on what's going on in the team, rather and so sort of learning about all the things that everybody's working on and not thinking at all about what's the benefit to the team members who are sitting there, and then they'll just go and do their emails and not really learn from each other at all. And so you could argue that it's a lazy boss, actually, who should probably be having one-to-ones and much shorter and briefer with each individual to talk about what's going on in their area and what they could do differently, and to find something different in this group forum to share, what would actually be useful for them to share in that time together.
I'll give you a lovely example. It was years ago. One of the first teams that I ever coached, it was a sales team, and they had so quite competitive, quite sharp elbowed, kind of lots of competition going on. And they had a Monday morning meeting. It was a virtual meeting, 2 hours long, because there's quite a few people in the team. And basically they went round every person, and each person gave an update as to what they were going to be doing to win sales for the rest of that week, what was going to be their focus and their sales plan for the week. Now, the only person who was really interested in that, apart from the person speaking at each time, was the leader of the team. So they were the only person. Everybody else, you can guess what they were doing whilst that meeting was taking place. Apart from sitting there resenting the person who's taking double the time that allocated for the update, or really really droning on. Imagine how resentful that I'd be of that going on. But they were probably doing their emails, planning their next call, doing some research on the next client that they were going to go and talk to. Anything but listen to the person who's talking about their sales plan. And they're certainly not sitting there thinking, I wonder how I can help that person, or what I could learn from them, or, how this might contribute to our team objectives. There's none of that going on. And so when the team realized that actually this team meeting was actually getting in the way of relationships, it was getting in the way of results, because that was 2 hours out of their day when they could be out selling. And in fact, they're just sitting there doing other things. It creates this negative impact on the whole team. And when they realized that actually, what was required, which was for the leader to have an update, could be done in another way. And so they changed it to a WhatsApp group. And so the leader said, I still want that update. I don't want to have one-to-ones with everybody because it takes too much time. So I'd still like you to all update me on your plan for the week, but let's do it in WhatsApp. And so everyone can see it. Nobody cares. Like, all you care about is doing your own update still, but at least the leader's got what they need out of that process. And how long does that take? 3 minutes probably per person to do that. No minutes to read the rest of the updates because they're still not interested, but at least they got that objective achieved in another way.
Yeah. And I think that's such an interesting thing, because how often do we as leaders do that? Just put in place a routine and think, oh, this is going to work. And then actually it gets in the way and creates resentment, inefficiencies, unproductive behaviors. I mean, no team is going to get to high performance with that kind of stuff going on. And the fix isn't difficult. It's just a mindset shift of, we don't need to do this way. We could do it another way, which, will make it better. But what do we really want to do together as a team? What is our purpose as a team? And I think, teams don't spend enough time actually unpicking that. What is the shared, point of existence for that group? Why does the boss have them all together? Because there will be a reason. And often it's just they've not spent enough time to think about it, to articulate it. And then once they can, they go, oh, right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And often I think that, why do teams put in place these routines that just don't work for the setup of that team, or create a better outcome? It's probably because that's the way they've always done it. Maybe the boss has inherited it from the previous, or that's been their experience in other teams, and therefore they feel like they should have these touch points once a week. Or selfishly, I want something, and the easiest thing to do, regardless of the consequences for the team, is to just get everybody on a call for 2 hours. And so there's a selfishness potentially going on there for the leader too. But I think there's always these opportunities to be asking questions about that, and to be thinking about, okay, so how could we create a different outcome, which actually creates more, instead of creating more meanness, new word we've just created, it creates more weeness instead. How could that Monday morning meeting, if they still ran it, because some teams, like we have a Monday morning meeting and we need it. I think that's a huge opportunity for us to create weeness, and then we've designed it with weeness in mind, actually. And so it's an hour long. We often don't need an hour. Most of it, probably I'd say half an hour, is catching up on our weekend. And some would say, well, where's the work in that? And how does that relate to work? And you're just having a nice chat about your weekends. You go, no, we're building relationships. We know that we're all human beings, and I want to hear about your weekend, Ali, and what you've got up to, because that's important in our relationship with each other, to not just go straight into and it can be really tempting to just go straight into the work, but actually that's a real investment that we know is important, right?
Yeah. I think, there is best practices around teams and getting teams together. And I think there is a view about you should have, one hour or huddles once a week and get the team together. Just like there's best practices as a manager, you should have a one-on-one, a month or whatever with your direct reports. So there's some different kind of views about best practices, but what they're missing is the content of those. And that's where I think, yes, it's important, like we do, to get together as a team and to talk, but it's got to be something meaningful and useful to everybody. Otherwise, it gets in the way. And so that's where the challenge comes, which is when we're all together, how does this add value to everybody and to us as a team? Because if it's
only talk about the stuff that adds value, to everybody. We've experimented a lot with that, actually, haven't we, in our team? And we as our team's grown, we've had to shift it and change it, because we start to notice, this is feeling very excluding of one particular member of the team, and how do we recraft it so that it is more inclusive again, and enables us all to contribute in some way. To think. So we're very clear that we only talk about stuff in that team meeting that is relevant to everybody. And if it's not relevant to everybody, we talk about it elsewhere. So we had to craft different routines as well to enable that, didn't we? So prior to our Monday morning meeting, which is at 11 o'clock, we now have an hour of catch up, individual catch ups prior, so that we don't use that, because that's a temptation. If we did it after, we'd be going straight into wanting to talk about the work in that team meeting, when actually it's more important to build relationships in that moment. So we do it before. So the timing is important too, isn't it?
Yeah. Although I think the other thing that we talk about, which is really useful for that me to we, is we talk about workload. And that is, so we're not interested so much in the details of the workload, but what we are interested in as a team is who's got heavy, unbearable amounts of workload in that week coming up, because then that's where the rest of the team can start to share and support people who've got a lot going on. And, that's that idea of we're all owning this. So if you've got an awful lot of work going on and it's up there, nobody's going to give you more work this week, because we kind of know that now.
We're going to leave you alone from that perspective,
But also, is there ways that we can lessen that load or help out? And I think that creates that sense of we're in this together. And if I've got a lot on, my team will be there to support me. So it's that sense of shared ownership that comes through. You're not on your own. These are all team goals, and you've got a particularly heavy workload. So let's all chip in.
And those are some of the symptoms when you have made that shift from me to we, is you start to feel, as an individual, you feel supported by the rest of your team. You're more likely to want to support others. You're more likely to be interested in what people are doing, because there's probably some synergy with what you're doing as well. You're going to want to collaborate more on specific things, not on everything, because we know that, collaborating too much is not good either. But collaborating with a purpose happens. You get less duplication of effort happening. You get less conflict happening. The benefits are endless, actually, in terms of what happens once you get to that we space. And of course, it's not just a one day you've got a me team and the next day you've got a we team. There's a process and you gradually move towards something. But once you've got there, it feels really good.
It does. And I think that's where you've got that full engagement, that energize, all those lovely feelings that people get when they're part of a high performing team, that make them want to stay and do more and feel really energized and proud of being in that team. So it kicks into all of those lovely emotions that people will have, which, you get on an individual basis. When you're on your own and you achieve great things. But there's something even more powerful about, when you do it as part of a team. You see it on football pitches, that the guy scores the goal and he goes up to the crowd and he's like, yeah. And then all his team members jump on him and are hugging him and they're all part of it too. That is what we're talking about with the we feeling. You're not on your own at all and everybody's part of it. And it's just a huge celebration then of what's possible when you get that synergy of everybody being part of this together. So it belongs to everybody. It doesn't belong to one person. And it's more than one person could have done on their own. And so you all know it and feel it and it's great.
Yeah, it's a very positive outcome. Might be useful for us to talk about how do you get a team to shift from me to we, and some of the things you can do. We've talked about routines as one of them. What are some of the other examples that you can think of, Ali, that help a team to make that mental shift from me to we?
I think the first thing to do, what we would do always is start with a diagnostic, is where's your team now? And we've got our different edge dynamics. And so, reason is usually where I would start with the team and say, do you know your team reason? What is it that you need to be together for? I mean, what is that value proposition that only you as a group, as a team deliver? And maybe for leadership teams, it is about leadership. It's we lead this organization to success and to
the
deliver
clues in
our
the name.
Clues in the name. So maybe it's that, and then unpick with them what leadership really means for the organization. Is it just for their function? No, they're leaders of the organization, even if they're responsible for a particular function. So they'll be looked at by everybody. They're seen walking across the car park. People will notice and take messages from that, subliminal ones. And then the other thing is clarity of results. You need to have really clear view about what results are expected and delivered and who's doing what and where's the gaps and the handovers and all of that. We've talked about routines, but you also need good relationships, to trust people, to challenge, to know they'll have your back. And then resilience. You need to have resilient teams where people can bounce forward from setbacks and learn from failures and successes and support each other to have the energy to keep sustaining that high level of performance. So I think, using a diagnostic to identify which of those areas would need most attention to start with is what I'd recommend and what I do when I'm working with teams.
I think it's a lovely place to start. And I think what the diagnostic gives you as a team is an opportunity to share perspectives on something. When you fill in a diagnostic, you're doing it from just your perspective. It's just how I've done it for our team. You've done yours recently as well. And, I only know currently how I feel about being part of this team and my own experience. But the beauty of the diagnostic process is the conversation we then have about it, which means I then get to hear how you feel about the team and I get to hear about everybody else's viewpoints, which are probably going to be slightly different in different places, maybe significantly different in some places. And so that process in and of itself starts to shift my thinking as an individual in this team from me only to us, to we, to what we're experiencing as a team and how that's different from one person because of their perspective on the world. And that could be different again to somebody else's. And, I think often with teams, when we first start, one of the indicators that a team is very me focused is the the range of scores that we have within the team, the diagnostic being quite broad. And that suggests that the experience within the team is quite different. As we shift the team from me to we, that starts to narrow a bit more. It's a nice little indicator for us that we-ness is coming out in the team.
Yeah, and I think it just opens up very nice conversations and gets the team thinking about what is it that we would usefully and valuably do together. And how can that help me as an individual in the work that I deliver as part of the overall experience of this team? And what can I do to help the other team members do a better job too? And so that's, there's, why wouldn't you? It seems like a no-brainer. And too often I think leaders say, oh, we haven't got time to do it. But my challenge back would be, you haven't got time not to do it. This is a way of becoming more effective and efficient. And high-performing teams do more with less. By their very nature, we're not talking about finding more hours in the day. We're about how do you streamline and use the collective brain power to review and challenge and make things work better. And we also know that that's more effective, it's more innovative, you're more likely to get a better solution. And so why do leaders consistently push back and just force people to keep working and slogging on the hamster wheel when actually they could do something quite differently if they got everybody involved?
Yeah, and the difference is so huge and noticeable when you do start to shift as a team from me to we. That competitiveness just fades away. It becomes let's us be successful together and let's be competitive as a team, which can be so powerful, can't it? And let's share resources rather than hoard resources. Let's fight together for more resources from the organization, and so on. So the power and the strength that comes in numbers becomes really powerful and noticeable in a team that is we focused as opposed to me focused. Yeah.
And the other thing you start to notice, because often the competitive edge comes from people wanting to prove themselves. They're ambitious, they want to get the good performance bonus, but they also want to get ready for the next job up, So, that can work in a high performing team because the team actually starts to support each other to grow and develop. So it's not about, oh, well, only one person will get that job. So we're going to do all in our power to make sure that you're not getting it because I want it, that competitive nature. What happens in a high performing team is people can be much more explicit and transparent about their ambitions, and the team can help each other to all develop that. And to find opportunities where people can develop and grow in a way that supports the whole team, not one at the, where everybody else loses. It's much more a win-win rather than I win, you lose kind of scenario. And that's where, when you look at really successful leaders and they move organizations and they often bring people with them, that's because they've worked really well together in the past and they trust them and they were probably part of a high performing team, even if it didn't last very long. But, you start to see that people build really strong connections. And I've seen leaders want to take whole teams with them because, they know that that's a good group. And indeed, I've seen, a team I've been working with, people don't want to leave. I mean, they do leave because they've found another opportunity, but they want to stay in the WhatsApp group for the team because they really enjoy it. And they really enjoy the team members and the work they do, and they want to still be part of it, which is very nice.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you'll soon be overloaded and you'll be off to your new thing. So bye-bye.
So we know that moving from me to we is brilliant. But, teams need to do that in order to be high performing. But there's more to be had. It's not the end of it. There is also an us at the pinnacle of this. And I think often what I notice is that teams try and leapfrog and kind of go from me to us, without doing the work on the we first. And the impact that can have is that they they can still have an us and them mentality, or they haven't really sorted themselves out and worked out how they're working effectively together as a we first, before they then start working with other teams in the organization well and sorting out those issues. And so it feels, like they've got to sort, the term "put your own house in order first," I think really comes true in this team context of sort yourselves out as a team first, make sure you are we and a strong we, and then start to focus on the external to the team relationships that you have, like, you're another team that you might have close working relationships with, but it's not working particularly well, or that senior stakeholder that's really tricky that you haven't quite nailed the relationship with yet, or that external supplier that that relationship just isn't working as it should be, and it could be so much more efficient and successful if you're doing things differently. To enable that to happen, I believe you have to sort the team out first and get to the weeness well first. Otherwise, what will happen is, if you're still at the me focus, each of those individuals will be thinking about, how can I manage the relationship with that external team or stakeholder or supplier? What can I do that will benefit me rather than the team as a whole in that relationship? It's still that me focus, so it's not really going to work properly in terms of fixing those relationships for the wider benefit of the team.
And it doesn't really change a culture then either, because what it's doing it by one person at a time. Whereas if you move from me to we, then what you've done is you've created a culture within the team about how they operate and how they work and their expectations of each other, and what their detailed values are and their purpose, which is more than just what they deliver, it's how they do it. And what's the benefits to all of them. And so I think when you're starting to move to that us piece, you're starting to say, how do, we work with, your lot of we over there, and how do we connect? And we're all part of value chains. And so it is important to review those connection points, and to, just as you did within your team, with the other teams, start to look at some of the similarities you have in terms of values and how you work together and what it is that you share. Because you don't have to do all their work and they don't have to do all of yours. But what is it that you hand over and what do you get back in return? And how can you make that more effective and smooth so that actually it becomes a process that works for everybody? And that can only happen if you've got trust, you've got good routines in place, and you have a sense of your shared purpose of what you're both trying to achieve together. So it does become that team of teams, that us mentality. And that's where leaders of whole functions have a big role to play in terms of setting up and role modeling what it is to lead high performing teams, their expectations that teams are operating with high levels of we and high performance, but that it doesn't end there, that they then need to have broken down the barriers for cross-team working and collaboration and transferring of resources, and that it should happen at all levels, not just through the leader, because that can happen too, can't it, Jenny?
It can. And what was occurring to me as you were talking about all of that, Ali, was that this is when you start to change a culture in an organization or in a function. This is when you start to get everybody working together towards the same objective. This is when results really start to fly and you get innovation happening, because innovation rarely is something that happens in one function alone. You need cross-functional collaboration in order to make that happen. The good ideas are not done just by, I don't know, the finance team or the product development team. They are enabled and initiated and executed across the business through teams of teams. So this is where you get the cultural shifts and the magic really happening. It can't. I think you mentioned it a minute ago. You can't. The leader can't do it all by themselves either. This is not something that can be fixed and sorted just by the leader, even though they often feel like it's their role to do so, interestingly. So, I often notice that leaders can hold their stakeholders very tightly. What do I mean by that? They're the ones who have the relationships with them. They're the ones who manage them, who ask for their input, who hear feedback about the team, who get set the direction of travel by them, and then they become the single point of failure or the bottleneck or the dysfunction, because let's face it, not all leaders will be great at having relationships with everybody. And it also creates this stuckness in the pipeline, the leadership pipeline, around team members within the team being able to build relationships with stakeholders at that level as well. And there's so many reasons, I think, why leaders could let go of holding on to those stakeholders quite so tightly and start to gradually involve their team members in the relationships with those stakeholders over time. What do you think, Ali, on that one?
No, I think it's absolutely true. I think there's no way that the leader can do it all on their own. I mean, some leaders make me smile when they say, "Oh, I'm going to do a culture transformation. I think it'll take a couple of years." And you go, okay. And so I've now written a slide deck, and we're going to communicate that to everybody, and we're going to put it on the walls, and they're all going to go through workshops. Well, this is me to us, supposedly.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, it's really hard to see it in action. And that's what people need to see in culture change. It's seeing behaviors really changing and people walking the talk. And it's much easier to do that if you're doing it as a part of a cohesive team, where you hold each other accountable and you can remind people about what it is you've agreed on. And so it's much more effective to move from me to we and then we to us to get your cultural shift. And in fact, I'm not sure it can ever really work by a top-down edict to all the individuals.
Can't you just tell people what to do? Yeah, isn't it as easy as that, Ali?
Well, they haven't made it theirs, have
if
they?
Only.
And let's face it, culture is your own deep
exactly
thing.
Right.
And your own experience. So, leaders have a role to role model. And I think role modeling the importance of teams and being, that teams are the way to get high performance and the high productivity, and to challenge their teams and their leaders who work for them to do the same is probably one of the biggest gifts you can give anybody, because being part of a high performing team, as we mentioned before, feels wonderful.
It does. It really does. Worth having, worth going after, worth putting the effort into, definitely. So that brings us to the end of our podcast today, where we've talked all about me to we to us. That it is a sequence, that most teams that we work with, if not all of them, start at the me phase, are very competitive, sharp-elbowed, want to think about themselves and what's in it for them only. But gradually they should transition into thinking about we. We'll give you some ideas for how that can happen, and the focus on routines being a really important one, but all the other edge dynamics as well, and maybe doing a diagnostic to help you to have that conversation, and then gradually moving into us as well. So starting to think about the team of teams and the relationships that your team has with other teams and how you can make that even more effective. And apply the same principles as you would from shifting to me to we, to help you to move from we to us. Too many words here. So it was lovely to have you here. I hope to see you again soon. All the best.
Thank you.